Every World War II anti-tank weapon ranked, worst to best. The best anti-tank weapon of World War II was not the one with the deepest penetration numbers. It was the one that let you walk away after pulling the trigger. 4 weapons defined what infantry anti-tank combat looked like: the anti-tank rifle, the PIAT, the bazooka, and the Panzerschreck. We are ranking them worst to best, using real penetration data and battlefield performance, not range specs. What actually happened when armor got thicker, logistics got brutal, and the guy carrying the weapon had one shot to get it right. The anti-tank rifle is last on this list, and it isn't close. This was a pre-war idea that the war outran almost before the ink dried on the production contracts. The concept made sense in 1936. Tanks were thin-skinned, slow, and poorly armored. If you built a rifle big enough, chambered in 14.5 millimeters, 0.55-inch caliber, or 7.92 millimeters, you could punch a hardened steel slug through the side plate and wreck whatever was behind it. The PTRD-41, the Boys, the Panzerschreck 39, all of them built around that same logic. All of them obsolete by the time they mattered most. Here's what the numbers looked like. The Soviet PTRD-41, firing the 14.5mm BS-41 round, could crack through roughly 30 millimeters of plate at 100 meters. At 300 meters, you are down to around 25 millimeters. That is it. That is what the physics of a solid steel slug moving through air gives you. And while that might have scared a Panzer II in 1940, by 1943, the Panzer IV had 80 millimeters on the front. The Tiger I was running 100 millimeters. Your 25 millimeters of penetration at distance was hitting a wall more than 3 times thicker than what your round could handle. The physics failure here is fundamental. A solid shot round is entirely dependent on kinetic energy, velocity times mass, and velocity bleeds away fast over distance. There is no chemical reaction waiting at the point of impact, no shaped charge collapsing a jet of superplastic metal through the armor. It is just a steel slug hoping momentum is enough. Against 1939 armor, sometimes it was. Against the armor the Wehrmacht was fielding by mid-war, it was a waste of trigger pull. And then there's the weight problem. The Boys anti-tank rifle ran 36 pounds. 2 men to carry it. 2 men to operate it effectively. The recoil on the larger calibers was brutal enough that shooters would flinch before the second shot, which means your follow-up round was going wide before you even chambered it. You're hauling a 36-pound problem across a hedgerow to put a hole in something that laughs at your best round. The one honest use case that survived was anti-material work. Soviet PTRD teams kept their rifles in service well past the point of tank-killing utility, because a 14.5mm round will still wreck a half-track, destroy a machine gun nest, or punch through a vision slit if the angle is right. They used it to suppress infantry at distance, to blind vehicles, to make life miserable for anything short of a medium tank. That's not nothing, but it's also not what these rifles were built to do. The lesson the anti-tank rifle left behind was clean. You don't defeat armor by throwing metal at it harder. The next generation of weapons took that lesson and answered it with chemistry. The British looked at the anti-tank rifle problem and arrived at a completely different answer than everyone else. No propellant gas, no rocket motor, no recoil-operated chamber. Instead, they built a weapon around a massive spring and a spigot that launched a shaped charge bomb downrange. The Projector Infantry Anti-Tank, the PIAT. And before you laugh at the mechanism, understand what it could do on impact. Roughly 100 millimeters of armor penetration from a weapon one man could carry. In 1942, that number could kill any German tank in the field. The shaped charge wasn't throwing metal. It was collapsing a copper liner into a superplastic jet, moving faster than the armor could respond. The physics were sound. The delivery system, though, was something else entirely. Cocking the PIAT meant compressing a spring rated at around 200 pounds of force. The standard method required lying on your back, hooking the stock under your boots, and hauling the trigger assembly upward with both hands until the sear caught. In a workshop, on a flat floor, that is a workout. In a ditch, in the rain, with a tank 80 yards away, it was a nightmare. 2 men were the realistic crew for the recocking process, which meant your second shot depended entirely on whether your loader was still alive, and whether either of you had the leverage to reset the spring before the tank closed the distance. And when the mechanism failed, which it did, the situation turned dangerous fast. The spigot rod could misfire and leave a live bomb sitting on the tray with no way to know if the next trigger pull would fire it, or nothing would happen at all. After-action reports from Arnhem in 1944 describe paratroopers knocking out German armor in close street fighting with the PIAT because at 10 yards the range limitation stopped mattering. Those same reports document jammed mechanisms, misfires, and at least one case of the weapon simply refusing to cycle between shots during an active engagement. The men who used it effectively were working around the tool as much as they were working with it. The weight was 32 pounds empty, which put it in the same neighborhood as the anti-tank rifles it replaced, except it could not engage at any useful distance. Effective range was around 100 yards in reasonable conditions. And reasonable conditions is doing a lot of work in that sentence, because combat in Northwest Europe was frequently neither reasonable nor conditioned. What kept it off the bottom of this list is simple. It could genuinely kill tanks. Not conditionally, not against light armor only. A clean hit on a Panther's side plate or a Tiger's engine deck could, and did, end those vehicles. The penetration number was real. Getting a clean hit, without the spring failing or the mechanism jamming or the range closing to suicidal distance, that was the test. Some men passed it. The PIAT ranks 3rd because the capability was there, even if everything around it was fighting you. Where the British went mechanical, the Americans went electrical. It was a steel tube, 54 inches long, weighing 13 pounds. Drop in a 2.36-inch fin stabilized rocket with a shaped charge in the nose. Close the contact, press the trigger, and a battery-powered igniter sends current to the motor. The M1 Bazooka didn't require a 200-pound spring, a second man to recock, or a prayer that the spigot would cooperate. It just fired. Early M6 rockets punched through around 76 millimeters of plate. That was enough to work against the sides and rear of most German armor through the North Africa and Sicily campaigns. The later M6 A3 round pushed penetration to roughly 114 millimeters, which kept the bazooka relevant against Panzer IV side plates and lighter vehicles through the end of the war. Where it struggled was predictable. The frontal armor of a Panther ran 80 millimeters of sloped plate, and slope changes the effective thickness considerably. A Tiger's front was 100 millimeters, with no apology. The bazooka, fired from the front, was asking 114 millimeters of penetration to defeat armor that functionally presented more resistance than that number suggests. Side and rear shots were a different story, but getting a side or rear shot on an alerted tank required either excellent positioning or the tank crew making a serious mistake. None of that changes what the bazooka actually accomplished as a concept. 13 pounds. Training that a soldier could absorb in a day. 1 man to fire, 1 to load. And the loader's job was simple enough that almost anyone could do it. A rifleman could carry 6 rockets alongside his standard load and still move at infantry pace. The PIAT asked you to be strong and lucky, and the bazooka asked you to be present and aimed. The German army in North Africa captured one intact and shipped it back to Kummersdorf for evaluation. Within months, they had a scaled-up copy in development. That's the clearest possible verdict on the design. Your enemy studies it and immediately decides to build one. The bazooka's electrical firing circuit did have a battery dependency that caused problems in cold weather and mud, and fuse reliability on early production rockets was inconsistent. But the platform itself was sound enough that the Germans considered it worth improving rather than discarding. What it couldn't do was keep up with the armor it was being asked to defeat. By 1944, the mismatch between a 2.36-inch warhead and a Panther's front plate was a tactical reality every American tanker and infantryman understood. The concept had proven itself completely. The execution needed to get larger, and the Germans were already there. The Germans took the bazooka's core idea, looked at the caliber, and decided 2.36 inches wasn't nearly enough. The Raketenpanzerbüchse scaled everything up to 88 millimeters. Same principle. Fin-stabilized rocket, shape charge nose, open tube. But where the bazooka's warhead was asking politely, the Panzerschreck was kicking the door in. Penetration figures for the RPZB-54 round land north of 200 millimeters. That number does not leave room for debate about angles or armor packages. It goes through whatever the Allies had, from any direction, at combat range. The weight cost was real. Over 20 pounds for the launcher, and more with the blast shield bolted on, and the shield was not optional. Early crews fired without one and learned fast that the rocket motor's backblast would burn your face and hands at the moment of firing. The shield fixed that problem and created a new one, bulk. This was a two-man weapon in practice, a gunner and a loader. And the loader's job was more demanding than the bazooka's equivalent because the rounds were heavier and the pace of reloading under fire required a working rhythm between both men. The backblast itself was a tactical liability in ways the weight was not. Firing from inside a building required enough clear space behind the tube that you were essentially advertising your position to anyone outside. In the open, the smoke signature from a fired round told the tank crew and everyone nearby exactly where the shot came from. Panzerschreck teams in Normandy and in the urban fighting of 1944 and 1945 solved this by firing once and moving shoot, relocate, shoot again. The weapon rewarded patience and punished anyone who treated it like a rifle. What it gave back for all of that was absolute confidence on impact. Where the bazooka gunner in 1944 was calculating whether a frontal shot on a Panther would work, the Panzerschreck gunner already knew the answer. One hit anywhere on a Sherman ended it. One hit on a Churchill's side did the same. Later, production models replaced the battery-dependent electrical igniter with a magnetic impulse generator. Turn the handle. The circuit fires. No batteries to fail in February mud. That engineering decision alone made it more reliable than the weapon it copied. Effective range sat around 150 meters, which forced teams to let armor get close before shooting. That is a nerve problem as much as a tactical one. But for an infantryman whose entire job was stopping a tank column from moving through a road junction, nothing else on this list did it as completely or as decisively. Shaped charges beat solid shot. Rockets beat springs. And the weapon you trust in the mud is worth more than the one with the biggest number on a data sheet. That is the whole ranking, and the physics do not lie. Drop a comment telling me which one you would take into a foxhole, and subscribe. More breakdowns are coming.